The educational needs and aspirations of refugees have received surprisingly little attention and been accorded much less importance than is warranted. As noted by Dryden Peterson 2010, the focus has been on life-saving interventions related to food, shelter, and health. Yet the benefits of having an accessible, refugee-friendly post-secondary education system are potentially life-saving too. Moreover, the benefits of that education are reaped by the host society as much as by the recipient of the education. Dryden Peterson and Giles 2010 refer to education as something which can enable a move from precarity to possibility. When refugees have equitable access to post-secondary education opportunities, the benefits accrued by student and society can be transformational. Why then do we allow refugees in Ontario to languish without clear pathways to access to higher education, amounting to what can be for many an incalculably cruel loss of time and potential? CREA 2010 notes that there are documented benefits of refugee education in building resilience, and Bajwa et al. 2018 argued that education can provide the platform for psychological recovery and healing for refugees. Nevertheless, significant obstacles stand in the way of access. These obstacles include needing to supply documentation and proof of prior education and credentials. For many refugees, obtaining copies of these records is impossible. If the applicant can obtain proof of their credentials, these credentials are often devalued by the host country and its institutions. Other barriers include the restrictive policies of the educational institutions refugees seek to enter, as well as the prohibitively high costs associated with post-secondary education. There is, as Bajwa et al. Note, a systemic problem in accessing and pursuing higher education. For the refugees and asylum seekers who have made it to Ontario, the first hurdle to accessing post-secondary education is primarily an informational barrier. Bajwa et al. 2017 note that refugees often lack accessible information about how to apply to schools, which programs require study permits, what financial supports are available, and how to access those. Many of the informants in Bajwa et al.'s study complained of a dearth of information or of information delivered in ways that were inaccessible to them. Some visited post-secondary educational institutes to ask questions and find out more, only to be told by the staff to check the website. Others relied on second-hand, word-of-mouth recommendations to navigate their way. It is almost as if there were an ad hoc approach to refugee applicants, and information is tailored primarily to domestic and international students, with no thought to the diverse and unique needs of refugee students. As a first step, I would argue that post-secondary institutions and the agencies that either funnel students into them or support them when they are students, such as WES, OCAS, OSAP, etc., need to make efforts to tailor information to refugee applicants and clients. This information should be provided in a client-friendly manner with multilingual information in multiple formats. Multilingual information is already available for international students, so it is clearly feasible. The next hurdle refugees face in accessing a post-secondary education is a financial one. At present in Ontario, only refugee claimants whose asylum claims have been accepted are entitled to apply for OSAP and attend college and university as domestic students. Because asylum seekers' claims can take a long time to be heard and may be subject to appeal, this means refugee claimants' lives are needlessly put on hold while they wait. The international fees refugee applicants may be expected to pay are prohibitively expensive. One relatively easy solution to the financial barrier to access would be to allow refugee claimants to apply for OSAP and to allow them to pay domestic tuition fees instead of the much higher international rates. I would, however, go one step further and recommend that all tuition fees for asylum seekers be waived. To add to the already significant financial burdens facing someone who has escaped persecution and war seems unnecessarily cruel. I would likewise argue that the entire application process to access higher education needs to be made more accessible to asylum seekers. Seeking to have one's credentials evaluated is a complicated and expensive matter for many newcomers. For asylum seekers, even obtaining original documents can be impossible. We need a more flexible way of assessing credentials and admissibility. For those with the requisite documentation, even the application to have them assessed is costly and onerous. For foreign trained nurses, for example, the wait to have credentials assessed can be especially long. We need a faster, more transparent process, and the fees should be waived on humanitarian and compassionate grounds. After making the application and acceptance process less Byzantine and more equitable for refugee applicants, we should turn our sights to creating refugee-friendly campuses with services that cater to this demographic's needs. As Mangan and Winter 2017 have noted, refugees can face a myriad of challenges on top of those experienced by non-refugee migrant students. It is time those challenges were addressed in a meaningful way. Counseling services should be expanded with more counselors who speak the client's languages and understand their context, and that would be an important improvement. If we are to create more welcoming refugee post-secondary educational institutions in Ontario, we need to teach our administrators, our support staff, and our faculty about this growing population. We also need non-refugee students to be informed on the issues affecting and creating refugees. As a start, all new teachers in Ontario should be required to take a course on working with refugee students. All existing teachers, on the other hand, should be required to take mandatory professional development on the topic. As noted by Naidu et al. 2018, it can be difficult for those who are marginalized to envision a future, which is why it is critical we weave refugees and their stories into the mainstream. We need to see refugees and refugee issues reflected in the curriculum used from K to 12 and beyond. This will ensure that there is wider sensitivity to and awareness of refugees and the experiences that have shaped them, as well as a deeper understanding of the many contributions they make to society. We should not just highlight the benefits that refugees provide to their host countries, but we should also examine the role that we sometimes play in events in the refugee source countries. It is only when we reflect in this way that we will understand just how connected we are to each other, and it will become easier to counter the rise of hate and xenophobia that we now see. Only by addressing this current lack of representation will we succeed in making post-secondary educational institutions truly welcoming, refugee-friendly spaces. Once we do, we all stand to reap the rewards.